Now, we all know the importance of being a good thinker. Most modern-day course books are also trying to integrate thinking, critical thinking, into their syllabus. Yet still, there are many challenges for teachers and learners alike when it comes to developing thinking skills. One key area is challenging students to get them to think more in and outside of the classroom, helping them to become more independent thinkers, helping them to take control of their own thinking, but also for teachers and learners alike, how we can develop a systematic approach for teaching and learning thinking skills, and how we can make something like critical thinking more visible for learners. At the moment, it's something that's very elusive for teachers and learners. So how we can be more explicit with our teaching of critical thinking. Now, we're going to have a look at three areas or three steps for a more systematic development of thinking skills. We're going to have a look at how we can develop ideas, how we can develop critical discussion as a first step towards critical thinking, and then finally we'll have a look at how we can implement more of a deeper critical thinking syllabus into our teaching and learning. So we're going to have a look at the how. So we're going to have a look at how we can develop ideas through infographics, and also the development of critical thinking through discussion type activities. And both these areas will be connected to personalization, how we can get students discussion questions that are more personalized to their own lives. So here's an example of an infographic taken from the Skillful second edition. So each unit will begin with one of these bright, colorful, clear infographics, which come with these discussion questions to get students thinking more about the topic before they go more in depth. So here are some example questions that are integrated into this activity. So what things, places, and situations can be extreme? So this infographic is all about different extremes at different heights. So very, very high things, and then sort of very, very low things under the sea as well. Additional questions might be, what does the infographic show? Or what is extreme about the death zone here? All questions designed to get students thinking a little bit more about the topic. Furthermore, we also have some example personalized questions, again, to start helping students connect the topic of extremes to their own lives. So here are a couple of example questions that we could use to get students to do that. Remember, when we're dealing with discussion questions, it's important to guide, support students as much as we can. Some students will be able to discuss quite fluently, quite openly, where others may need some more structure. For example, the sentence prompts are a good way of helping students begin the discussion with those structures. A couple of activities here. If you want to use class discussion with these type of thinking activities, a couple of examples here. Remember, the best discussions keep everyone active, either by sharing ideas or getting them thinking, or challenge them as much as possible. So the first idea here is called group answers. So here you divide your class into different groups and give each group a number. Students have a time to discuss those discussion questions. Then the teacher prepares little numbered cards which are connected with the numbers of the groups. So the teacher chooses one number card, for example number 2, which connects to group number 2, and group number 2 then have to share their ideas. The teacher could then choose another number, and that group, for example group number 4, have to say whether they agree or not. That's a great activity for keeping your students on their toes. Each group doesn't know which group will need to give the answers. Likewise, each group doesn't know which group will need to give an agreement or disagreement. Another option here is you might want to have a soft ball or a beach ball that you throw to the group of your choice. That group then has to give their opinions. That group can then throw the ball on to another group who either have to agree or disagree with their own opinions. So that was idea development, some basics of getting students thinking about topics at a slightly deeper level. The next area we're going to have a look at is critical discussion. So this is really laying the paving stones to move towards slightly more critical type thinking. So here are some examples of some critical thinking type discussion questions. So here we are moving towards more development of sub-skills of critical thinking. Like reading, like listening, they all have sub-skills that we can develop. So with critical thinking, we see here, for example, how we can read between the lines, maybe apply existing knowledge, and also lateral thinking. And maybe question number 1. Question number 3, for example, there is more about weighing up positive and negative sides of a situation, okay, in order to reach a final decision. Likewise, in this next critical thinking activity, students are required to rank these activities. So they're evaluating ideas against a specific criterion, okay? So all different sub-skills of critical thinking that we can be developing with our students. Likewise, personalization is key to getting students engaged and to motivate them to discuss with these types of questions. So for example, here they're dealing with submersibles, so those transports which go beneath the sea to research and discover new types of marine life. So asking them, would you ever go down a submersible? Why not? So when we're dealing with discussion questions like this, here are a few example activities to get you on your way. So one idea is a rotating stations type activity. So at each station, you set up a discussion question. You divide the class into groups, and each group will start at a different station with a different question. They have a set time limit to discuss their question, and on a piece of blank A4 paper, they record their ideas. The teacher then calls time, and the groups rotate around to the next station, and they deal with the next question. Before they deal with that question, they can read the previous group's answers, and they can discuss based on that answer, and then they can write down their own answers as well. You repeat rotating through all the stations. Here's an idea for ranking type activities here. Again, as teachers, what we need is guidelines. Again, we don't have that much time, and having activities ready to go is a real bonus for teachers. So if we look at the teacher's notes here from the Skillful second edition, it helps the teachers break down this ranking activity into 5 different parts. Okay? So firstly, they're exploring the criterion. Number 2, they evaluate each activity against that criterion. They compare the 4 activities with each other based on that evaluation. And then they have to justify their decisions with other groups. And then finally, they listen to others in order to negotiate a joint ranking. So in order to come to a final decision. So one idea the teacher might use here is like a scale. So from not extreme to very extreme. So the teacher can use those activities from the course book, or could ask students to add in their own activities which are more connected to their own lives. They then have to plot those activities on this scale depending on their opinions. They can do that individually first, then in groups they can debate those activities about how extreme they are and come to some kind of conclusion or negotiation together, and then plot those activities in a final task based on that negotiation. So moving on now to the final part, we're going a little bit deeper into what actually critical thinking is. And here we're now developing more of a systematic critical thinking syllabus. So here is an example taken from the Skillful second edition level 1. The kinds of sub-skills that they would develop inside that level. So again, we're kind of building up a critical thinking syllabus. We're making critical thinking more visible for teachers and for learners. So throughout that level, they're developing ranking skills, supporting an argument skills, justifying answers, evaluating sources, etc. So they're building up those sub-skills as they go through each level. At the higher levels of Skillful second edition, there is a more explicit focus on each sub-skill. So for example, here we have the sub-skill of critical thinking, recognizing contradiction. So we have some explicit input about that sub-skill. So students read about that skill, develop a more visible, explicit idea about what that skill is, and then they move on to create more awareness around that sub-skill. So here they're answering questions about that sub-skill to build up their awareness of what contradiction is. Then they move on to some more sort of practical activities where they're circling options about which of the sentences is a contradiction. Again, they're building up their awareness through this more explicit approach to critical thinking development. Finally, they get to apply their knowledge through a group discussion. So, for example, why it is important to recognize contradiction in society as a whole. So they're applying their knowledge to a discussion task. Again, it's a very personalized task to get them engaged, to get them motivated with that discussion. Here are some other examples of some sub-skills which students would develop explicitly throughout those higher levels of Skillful second edition. So for example, the second one here, we have logical fallacy. So dealing with anecdotal evidence, so why it's important to back up your arguments with strong evidence or strong facts, not just anecdotal evidence. So those were the 3 steps of helping us to develop better thinkers in and outside of the classrooms. Good luck with developing thinking skills with your students in your classrooms, and I hope you'll have a lot of fun with that.